Jeff, it's up to you. It's 7:32 if you wanted to get started. Where are you?
Yeah.
There you are. And I'll watch the chats if you guys want to send chats in for questions or whatever. I'll be keeping an eye on that, and I'll keep an eye on the waiting room as people come in to request to come into the room.
Okay. Yeah, well, I can start up. Welcome to everybody. Vince will actually introduce our guest tonight, Lance, so I'll let Vince do that, and as well as talk a little bit about the program. But in the meantime, the board met last week.
You like it, honey?
Talked about a few things. Some of the discussion is around, you know, opening up, and that's not going to happen anytime soon, but we're starting to talk about what does that look like? What does that mean? What does that mean for the club? You know, it'll be a tricky time, but we'll just stay tuned and we'll keep working at it. And my guess is once we do open up, we'll need even more help from everybody, because my guess is we would have some people on site, we will have some people possibly on Zoom, and so our duties will multiply. So stay tuned and be thinking of how you'd like to help out. But so that'll come. In the meantime, let's see. Another thing that I talked about before, and Vince, I think, mentioned it in the last email, but the board did meet and discuss whether we allow guests or not guests, and whether we are gonna take paid guests. So basically it's going to be a mix of that. So some nights we would allow members to just invite guests. Some of the special speakers we'll have in, especially those that will cost the club a bit to bring in. We would have donation requests from outside folks. So we have the one next week, Joe DiMaggio, and that one we would ask for people to donate $10 if they're not a member, and then they would get the link. Or they have the option to join, and then it's free. So we'll see how that works. But that's the way we're approaching it at this point. Let's see. Facebook, just those that have been participating, thanks. Last week we did favorites, and that was fun. I mean, it's fun for me to see what everybody's favorite was for the last year and why. And a lot of what comes through is, it's not just this is the best picture I ever took, but how that picture made me feel.
Don't know how to do it.
Made me feel, and I think that's a lot of how we approach our photography. So that was good. And this week we're doing anything with wheels. So if you haven't participated, jump on the Facebook group and send that on. So, and then the final thing, and this just came up this afternoon actually, but I thought I'd just mention in July, and Vince will talk about programs then, but I had Margot Reed, who some of you know, some of you had met before. She was a student that entered our contest, won a contest, I think won scholarship money, and went on to photojournalism. And she contacted me and said, I've been thinking, I'd like to do some type of discussion with photography people around photography and racism, and how our photography can either help or make situations worse in what we convey. And he said, do you think the members would be open to that kind of discussion? So we're starting to talk about that. So look for that in July. So it'd probably be Margot leading the discussions, as well as a couple other guests that she's thinking about, and we'll see how that goes. But sounds like that would be an interesting program. So that's all I have at this point. I'll turn it over to Vince and you can kick us off.
Okay. Well, thanks, Jeff. And again, if we can all mute the mics just to keep the background noise down. Just very quickly, you'll be getting a newsletter this Friday. We skipped last week. We're going to be going every 2 weeks. And Ginny was kind enough to pick up that ball, and she'll have her first newsletter on Friday. And you'll see the current speaker schedule that we have. The next talk, obviously, as was mentioned tonight and previously, is Joe DiMaggio for next Monday night. That would be our first paid meeting. And then Gabriel Allen will be talking on social media the following Monday, the 22nd, and Frank Placzynski on the 29th on HDR. And beyond that, you can check the newsletter. So with that, unless anyone has any questions for Jeff or I think we'll get started with our session tonight. Again, I'll watch the chat room and try to get to you. And Ginny tells me that it will be either Friday or Saturday. We haven't settled on whatever day she gets it out will be great. So tonight, I'm extremely excited to have an outside guest do our judging of our competition. We've talked about this before, and I think the educational opportunity here is going to be really good. And I did a course with Lance, and then he was kind enough to agree to work with us after I did that course with him, which was really wonderful on Lightroom development and organization. It was a 4-session plus a private session, and it was extremely needed, and I learned a huge amount. I've also done a National Parks at Night 5-day and night exhausting workshop in San Francisco, which was unbelievably fabulous. Talks all day and shooting all night. It was amazing. So you can check out their website of some of their offerings. And there was one other thing I wanted to mention about that. Most recently, the NAPAN group was supposed to be with us for our night workshop. And unfortunately, in May at the Heritage Park, that had to be canceled. So that was really disappointing. And that was going to be 2 of the guys coming out with us. And we hope to get that rescheduled to shoot the Milky Way over the Heritage Center in next spring, I guess. So without any further discussion on my part, I'd like to introduce Lance, who's on my screen up at the top with the big headphones. Lance is a resident of Vermont. He is a longtime professional photographer. Been quite interested in doing night scenes of the environment and in man-made environments and natural environments. He's authored 2 books, which have been translated, in one of them up into 7 languages. A book on including night photography, Finding Your Way in the Dark, is the one that was translated in 7 different languages. He's a partner in National Parks at Night. He has lectured on photography for 20 years at the New England School of Photography, Boston University, the Houston Center of Photography, the Maine Media Workshops, the Rocky Mountain School of Photography. So all of the really big ones. And in addition to all of that, Lance does individual independent workshops and international photo tours and photo workshops. So check out his website, and I know we're gonna be in for a good treat tonight. And with that, Lance, I'll pass the mic over to you and go from there.
All right, well, thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here and to see your images and do some judging. Thank you for the introduction, but I do want to start off with a what do you call it? A disclaimer, if you will. I sincerely hope that any criticism or comments that I make tonight will be taken in the spirit that they're intended of how to make your photography better, and not as, an insult. And I also want to say most emphatically that I have been a professional photographer for a long time. I've taught photography for more than 20 years, but it's just my opinion. If you had a different judge, I'm sure you'd have different scores and different results. So it's really important to keep that in mind whenever you're entering a competition, and regardless if it's just club members or a big international show with thousands of entries. Of course, we always want to get in. We always want to win, but it's the opinion of 1, 2, 3 judges, and it's not necessarily a reflection on how good or how bad your photograph is. So just wanted to put that out there up front. But I did see a lot of great images in your submissions tonight, and some that need some work, and there also, I think there were a number of them with just a little bit of post-processing, a little bit of editing can be improved pretty dramatically. So when we do the critiques, because, and this is something that I've never done before, because I've judged plenty of clubs before, but I've never done it via Zoom, and I've never had the images sent to me this way. So I took the liberty of entering them all or importing them all into a Lightroom catalog, and I did some very quick, mostly just cropping edits on a few of them to show you what I thought were the some of the potential that were hidden in your images. I didn't do that with all of them, but we'll show that as we go through. I'll show the image as you presented it, and then I made a snapshot in Lightroom of a few quick edits just to show what was in there. So I guess we might as well jump right into it then. And let's see, we'll
be starting with Class B this time tonight. We did A last time first. And then nature, I guess, Lance? Is that what you're set up for?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And are we going to start with the winners, or just jump right into the critique? It's
are you able to do your critique first without mentioning the winners, and then I'll show the winners.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds great.
Okay, go ahead.
That sounds great. Okay, so let me see here. All right, I'm going to turn off my video and share the screen. And let's see, look at this one. All right. So this is Class B nature. All right. Obviously there's a lot of birds here. There's not really one point of focus, there's not really one clear subject, and that's often the case in a scene like this. But with that in mind, I think it's well organized. What's in there, the subject, the way it's divided, seems to be pretty well organized, and that's I think that's a difficult thing to do when there isn't one clear subject. I think perhaps right here, hopefully you can see my cursor moving around.
Yes.
Yeah. My eye tends to go to this bird, and then to this one back here, and then over here. And maybe somebody else's eye will do differently, but the darker birds seem to draw my eye, and they help to move me around the image rather than just kind of being stuck in one place. So I like that. I don't know if it is a, yeah, I'm looking at the metadata here. I don't have the camera information or the exposure information, but there's some technical issues with the image. There's a lot of chromatic aberration that I can see here and here. You can see this kind of blue fringing and magenta fringing, and it appears in a lot of the image. And that's an optical aberration or flaw that can usually be pretty easily corrected in post-processing. There's not a whole lot of detail in here, which makes me wonder if the image was severely cropped, if it's, you know, a really small part of a larger image, or maybe you know, just not the best equipment. But you know, the image itself, I think it works pretty well, and I like the way it's organized. All right.
I'll announce the names since Lance doesn't know who they are, and that was Kathy Grimm's image.
Okay, thank you, Kathy. All right.
And this is this is Kathy's image.
All right. So this one, I think the primary subject obviously is the waterfall. You've got the, all of the different archways here, and this diagonal line of the water, and the bridge lead us back into the background. And then we've got this diagonal here, which does a pretty good job of bringing us back to the foreground, which is a good thing. And there's this little, kind of like a punctuation mark of this little island right here. I think there's a lot of information here included that doesn't really add anything to the image. So here's my crop of it, just taking a little bit off of the left and the right side. It really just kind of condenses it down to the essential information of what's really important in the scene. I didn't do anything else other than cropping this image here. And I just went full screen. I just want to make sure you could see it when I did do that, right?
Yes, we did see that. And Lance, this, you may want to mention your score on this one because of the nature category.
Oh, right. This one was disqualified because of the man-made objects. It's, no hand of man in the nature category, but still wanted to talk about it anyway. Okay. Right. So this one is Waterhole.
Pat's image.
Somebody needs to mute. There we go. Okay. All right. Sorry, quite all right. Okay. I think this is a pretty powerful image. What it really makes it work for me, you've got two separate and distinctly different groups of animals. They're divided by the river, by the water hole, whatever it is. And this one right here, in particular, because he's, the furthest one forward and kind of more, he's more clearly silhouetted because he's against the water. He's looking over in this direction, and he leads us into the other group on the other side. And we've got a couple of them looking back towards the photographer. So I think that makes it work really nicely. I tend to look at the right side first, move my eye over to the left. The river kind of takes me back. Looks like there's a hippo right there too in the middle. And then I go back over here and see these animals looking back towards the camera. So it's a pretty cool image, a great scene, really neat to be there. I did a little tiny bit of editing on there, just brought the highlights down, put a little post-crop vignette, and that's it. I think that this is just bringing as it was submitted, bring the highlights down just a touch, bring out a little bit more detail here, and then put a post-crop vignette that kind of contains the image. It's not enough to really notice the vignetting from the crop, but I think it does contain the image nicely. Makes it gives us a little visual focus on the subject rather than kind of going off the edges of the frame. All righty. Now this one, again, the subject is mostly the wildlife, but there isn't any particular creature, bird to focus on here. So fortunately for us, we've got this zigzag pattern of the water that leads us back into, from the foreground through the middle ground and into the background. And I think that makes an otherwise, fairly ordinary scene a little bit more visually interesting. And I did a few little edits on there and a crop. I don't think we need that much sky in this image. I'm a big fan of composing as well as you can in camera, but not every image fits the aspect ratio of your sensor or your film. So, there's no problem. I don't have any issue with cropping after the fact. Try to get it right in camera, but if you've got a square image and a rectangular sensor, why not?
That image was by Deb Pat as well.
All right, and this one is Geyser.
This is Gabriel Allen's image.
Okay, this is an image that I thought has a lot of potential in it, but it's kind of held back by the heavy foreground. What's really interesting in the image is the water, the steam coming out of the water and merging with the clouds in the sky. But fully half of the image is this rocky foreground. So, I think the best way to improve it. Now look at the transition. You can see my develop history here. There's about a dozen steps, and I made a few little adjustments. Most of them are kind of going back and forth. So there's really not much work done on here, but look how much more dramatic it is from there to there. Yeah, I think it fits that panoramic format, and it's darker, moodier, and it's just got more atmosphere this way. All right.
This is also by Gabriel Allen.
All right. This image is almost monochromatic. It's almost black and white, except for a little bit of green in the water. Otherwise, we're in a black and white landscape. The light is really flat. And I think that's what hurts this, amazing scene more than anything else, is that, there's just not a whole lot going on with the light. But, because there's so little color in there and it's kind of flat, I thought that this would work well as a black and white image. And I also thought that the left 10 or 15% of the image really isn't adding anything to the story. Just this little bit over here on the left-hand side, it doesn't really add to the drama of the waterfall. So just a little crop and a black and white conversion, and I think it's a stronger image. Okay, here we go. I think it's pretty well done. The water drops on here, to me, they look a little bit too intentional, and I assume it was added, but I can't say that for sure. I don't want to make the presumption. I'm losing the word for what the area where the flower attaches to the stem. I can't think of it right now, but it's, you know, it's almost dead center, but not quite. And I don't, you know, I'm not sure if a wider view showing the whole flower or a tighter crop. Yeah, you know what? I don't think I cropped this one or tried to crop it. I don't have any history here, but I'm wondering, you know, if something like that might be a little bit more powerful, putting this, you know, this emphasis that our leading line of the stem taking us into the frame, put this emphasis right on a third, and then everything radiates out from there. Otherwise, with it being, you know, almost dead center, but not quite, there's, you know, there's a little bit of tension there, and I think not in a good way.
That shot was Maya Kearns.
Okay.
And okay, go ahead.
All right. You know, I guess I could say the same thing about the water on here. It can be a dramatic trick, but somehow to me it worked better in this image. But you know, and I think I probably would have scored it the same way with or without the water on the flower. Something about the composition here, it really works quite nicely for me. You know, I think the background being completely out of focus really helps dramatically. If this leaf right here was sharp or even a little bit more in focus, it would be really hard to make out and separate, even though the colors are so different. So I think the composition is well conceived. The three distinct colors, or four colors if you include the, you know, the bit of the bud here, you know, they're all kind of complementing each other and they work very nicely together. So I think this one is a lot more successful than the last one. I think it might be the same person, but
It's the same person. This is
Great.
Maya Kearns.
Great. I think you did a much better job on this one. And it looks great. So thank you. All righty. This one's powerful. It's great. You know, it's kind of minimalist. There's not a whole lot going on in the, you know, not a whole lot of different tones. You know, it's kind of almost a silhouette, a few highlights here and there. But there's some nice little touches. You know, you see little bits of the tree under the water. That's nice. Just a few little ripples. You know, the bird, the reflection of the bird. I think the placement of the bird, that it's not interfering with any of the branches, make it a nice, powerful composition. You know, I don't need to see any of the detail in there. It's, you know, you can see quite clearly what it is. It's great. I think you can improve it a little bit more. The highlight up here, this is kind of like the brightest thing in the frame, and it's a little bit clipped, or at least in the JPEG copy that I got, there wasn't any real detail in here to bring back. But I did try to darken this down a little bit. And I also didn't really like this branch or stick coming out of the frame. So just a couple of little quick edits made that go away on the left side. And I darkened this down as much as I could without, you know, making it obvious. And if you still have the raw file, you might try doing that a little bit more if you can, just because it's the brightest part of the image and it's near the edge of the frame. It draws my eye to that spot. So, you know, you really want your eye to go right to the bird and then follow the tree as it goes through the water. But
That
nice
was John
job.
Connell's image.
Nice job. All right.
This is Bob Gross.
Okay. So, you know, we have I think we've got a point of emphasis right here, whatever this is floating in the water. That's certainly what, you know, it's the most solid part of the frame. You've got this little bit of dark lines, almost like an arrow leading up to it. So my eye goes right to that spot, and it does, even though the reflection of the trees and the movement in the water is really what's more compelling about it, the way that this object is placed in the frame, I think it holds the viewer's eye there more than you really want it to. So my edit on this was just basically to crop it a little bit tighter. You still get the sense of everything that's going on there, but there's a little bit more. This open space in here becomes a little bit more important. So I don't know. To my eye, that's a stronger composition. But you know, again, like I said before, it's one person's opinion. So if you disagree with me, you know, I've got no qualms with that. So thank you.
This is also Bob Gross.
All right. This was a great capture, great use of a fast shutter speed, and you know, a fairly shallow depth of field. Probably could have used a slightly wider aperture to throw out the background a little bit more if the lens allowed for it. There's a little bit of interference with the goose and this branch right here. You know, having done a little bit of bird photography, I know what it's like. I know how challenging it is, and how you can shoot 100 frames and lucky if you get one. And I think this is done, you know, works out really pretty well. The splash and the takeoff, the framing, all work pretty well. I do think this branch is a little bit distracting. Not a whole lot you can do about it. Maybe the next frame, he's up. The goose is up a little bit higher, blocking it. I don't know. Maybe there isn't one. But I also found the trailing one to be a little bit distracting. And it looks to me as though the photographer did, you know, darken down this to minimize the distraction of the second bird. And I think that was a good call. I don't know, maybe removing it altogether and just allowing all of the focus on the image to be on the splash and the one goose. Yeah, not sure.
Okay.
To me, that felt a little bit better. All right, and that's it, right?
Yes, and I'll share my screen now, and
Okay. All right, let me.
you have to probably release it, or no, screen share. Here we go.
Where's my little Zoom window again?
And then
There we go.
while these are up, we can show you two of Lance's images.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh. Fantastic. Maybe you can talk about those at the end, Lance. So we'll start with honorable mention. Because of the way the scoring was done, Lance felt that he needed to do 2 honorable mentions. I know we have gotten away from that, but this is how the scoring worked out. So we'll start with honorable mention, Class B, nature. This one from Gabriel Geyser.
Can I make a quick comment on that one?
Yes.
Yeah, I think if it had been cropped closer to what I had done, I would have scored it much higher for sure.
And the other honorable mention is this by Bob Gross, Runway. The third place by Deb Pat, Waterhole. Second place by Maya Curran, Glad Bloom. And first place by John Conlon, Reflections.
Congratulations, everybody.
I'll stop my screen share. Go ahead, Lance, we're back with you.
Okay.
Again, I'm monitoring the chat room.
All right. Just hide hiding the zoom controls so they don't overlay my view here. All right, so Class B pictorial, and these are just sorted by capture time. If you're wondering about the order, it's just when the order of when they were taken. And psychedelic sprinkles.
This is by Kathy Grimm.
Okay, this is a fun image. It's pretty heavily processed with effects rather than just as a, it's an interpretation, and I think that's fine. And actually, I think it's more heavily manipulated than I would do with my own images. But I think that the way that you did it works really well with this particular image. And I commend you for suiting the development style to the subject matter. I think that works pretty well. My biggest beef with it is just that her feet are just cut off. Just need just a little bit down there at the bottom, and have the whole person in the image. It's not a huge distraction, but it's definitely something that I noticed. All right.
This is Kathy.
All right. This, I think, has the potential to be an amazing scene. You've got these different shapes, all these girls, in different positions, all looking away from the camera, but, doing different movements. You've got all these different colors. But I feel like the way that they're all kind of clustered together here and overlapping and, really doesn't allow for a strong sense of organization in the image. This is the kind of scene, I think, if you're photographing this, you take 100 or more images, maybe like when you're shooting birds, right? And then do a really tight, harsh edit and find the very, very best one. Because this image is about, it's about these girls looking for stuff in the water, but visually, it's about the spatial relationships between the different shapes and colors. And they're all kind of, a lot of them are kind of overlapped and lumped together in a way that I think there, with a little luck, there might have been a better moment. I think it's so cute that she's holding up her little skirt there so that she doesn't get wet, but it's kind of lost in the chaos of the rest of the image. I'd ask you to look up the work of the Czech photographer Josef Kudelka, who is an absolute master of photographing the human condition. Josef Kudelka. We can put that in the chat too. In particular, two bodies of work published as books. One is called Exiles and the other is called Gypsies. Absolute mastery of composition and photographing the human condition. Okay.
This is Deborah Pat.
All right. This is a fairly simple, straightforward image, but I think it's very well composed. It's very balanced. The scale of the land formation in the foreground and the ship in the background, it's great. You've got that, a lot of depth. And again, the composition is really well balanced. It's not a terribly exciting scene and the light is not terribly exciting, but you made a great composition out of it. And I think you worked very well with what you had available to you. Okay. So this one, when I look at this image, pretty much my eye goes right away back to the light at the bottom of the tower, and then shoots right up to this point, and then I'm kind of done. You know, the rest of the image is almost irrelevant. It's also it's pretty monochromatic. There's not a whole lot of color there. It's a difficult situation to photograph because there's deep shadows down here and, you know, bright sky up there. So I did tinker around with this one a little bit. I did some perspective correction to try to minimize some of this leaning vertical perspective. And I also converted it to black and white, since I thought that, you know, there's so little color here. It's more about the, you know, the structure than it is about color. And the graphic shapes of the windows and the movement of the architecture, I think, comes through a little bit more clearly in a black and white image than in a color image.
This was Gabriel Allen's image,
All right.
and this is
Um,
Debbie Pat's image.
Okay. This is an amazing scene, and a place that I would love to be there in, you know, the last light or the first light of the day, you know, kind of depending on which direction you're looking here. I think there's the photographer did a nice job with the composition, and you've got, you know, clearly defined foreground, middle ground, and background. So it's a strong composition. I think there's a bit more sky than you really need. And, you know, the midday sunlight doesn't really help it. It unfortunately, you know, takes away from an otherwise pretty amazing image. So a few quick edits. I took a little bit off both the top, and did I crop from the bottom too? Yeah, maybe a tiny bit from the bottom. And again, what I'm trying to do when I crop an image is just condense it down to the, you know, the bare essentials of what the image is all about. Anything that's extraneous, get rid of it because you don't need it. Okay, so this one, I had to be honest, I had a hard time with this image. You know, the lightest things in the frame are these out of focus cattails in the foreground. You know, so those bright spots, they really draw the eye in there. There's, you know, it's got a shallow depth of field, so the extreme foreground and the middle ground and background are out of focus, but you've got the part of the engine block here, and these couple of cattails right in front of it are sharp. But I think the composition is tough. You know, it's disorganized, it's chaotic, and I think you need to spend some more time making visual sense out of a chaotic scene. Right now, the way it is, the cattails are too overwhelming and too distracting, and that's, you know, apparently not what you're trying to, you know, not the subject of the photograph. So I think there may be some interesting compositions here, but this is just a little bit chaotic and disorganized, and I don't see what the photographer's story was, you know, what they were trying to show with this one.
That was Gabriel Allen's image.
All right.
Burns' image.
Okay. This is, you know, this is pretty interesting subject. It's very, the colors are really garish. I can't quite tell if this is underwater or not. You know, it almost looks underwater. I don't think it is. But again, it's an interesting subject matter, but there's no real focus on the composition. You know, I've got these, you know, the two little structure plant things, whatever they are, that are almost like antennas on a face, but I don't get the rest of the scene. So I think, yeah, again, I think interesting subject, but it's not focused, and I think you need to maybe get in a little bit tighter, make it a real tight macro shot, and narrow the focus down to a smaller part of this scene, and pay attention to foreground and background, and the edges of the frame. I find the big light colored object in the background and this one over here on the right edge keep drawing my eye away from the subject in the center of the frame.
Bob Gross.
All right. I was happy to see a couple of night shots, being the night photographer myself, but and this one, I think it works pretty nicely. You're in a way kind of breaking rules of composition by having these people right here over on the edge of the frame. So, I do like the emphasis, this kind of grounding or anchor point here in the foreground with the yucca. All of the water that leads us up, and you've got this one stream of water going out of the frame here. The repeating pattern that comes down with this water shooting down here. And these guys, I think, are really important. I think they add a lot to the scene, looking, taking your eye back here. These guys over here, not so much. If there was a way to maybe take a step or two to the left and not include them in the frame, it would have been better. If you're not ethically opposed to cloning them out and you have got the Photoshop skills to do it, you might look at that. I don't think that, I think if you crop them, maybe, maybe not. It's then this railing becomes a problem, and these guys are so close to the edge. It would have been better, I think, to take one or two steps to the left and recompose so that you had a little more clearance over here, and these guys were not in the way. So.
Bob Gross.
All right. This one, it's like right out of Field and Stream magazine. Just gorgeous. And this is all about being in the right place at the right time. I think everything is working very well here. The two boats, the two groups of figures, this one being darker and larger. It's the foundation, it's the anchor point. It's subject-wise, it's the most important part of the frame. And visually, it has the most emphasis. So for that reason, I think it's working really well. But, we've got this guy here, and his rod is a leading line that brings us over here to this guy. So I think this is working really well. I did do a couple of quick edits on there, not very much. I did notice that the horizon line is just a smidgen, like 1 degree off here. So I added a little, I moved the blacks down a bit and gave this a little bit more density, a little bit more contrast, and straightened out the horizon line. But this is a really lovely shot. So congratulations on that one. I think it's the last one. It is.
It is, yes. And I'll bring my screen back in. Okay, we'll start with the honorable mention, and as last grouping, there are 2. Deb Pat for insignificant, and Deb Pat for the crater shot.
Congratulations, Deb.
3rd place by Kathy Grimm, Psychedelic Sprinkles. 2nd place, Moonshot, Bob Gross. And first place, Morning Glow by Bob Gross.
Yeah, congratulations, everybody. This, I got to say, this image really jumped out of all of the entries. This one was one of the ones that just jumped out at me right away, even just looking at the thumbnails. So, well
Okay.
done.
I will stop my screen share. Lance, your critiques are absolutely wonderful. You've gotten some nice comments in the chat, so thank you.
Oh, thank
Very
you.
educational.
Well, thank you, everybody. All right. So here we go. Okay. So glacier fed. This one's is very dynamic, right? There's a lot happening. There's a lot of movement going on in here. And I mean, not just the water rushing by and the clouds, but visual movement. What's interesting though, is that, you know, the way it is right now, there's not a tremendous, there's not like one single anchor point. I think, you know, that all of these different, and when I'm looking at an image like this, a landscape or any photograph, you know, I see it on multiple levels. I look at it for the visually, just, you know, independent of the subject matter, just visually, does it make sense? Is it interesting? Is it compelling? Graphically, lines, shape, color, you know, all of those things. And this one's got these interesting elements. You've got this rock in the foreground. You've got this rock in the river, the trees, the mountains. And then, you know, then there's this stuff over here on the right. The stuff on the right doesn't belong, because I think that's a whole lot stronger. What that, you know, a little 15% on the right edge, there's nothing there that is visually compelling. Let's get rid of it. And I think if I wanted to do this justice, I actually need to crop it a little bit tighter. See this little light spot of the tree on the edge of the frame? You know, you got to watch out for the little details like that. That is not good. And, you know, I don't think we're going to lose anything by coming in just a little bit more. There we go. Oops. All right. Okay.
Excuse me, that last one was Tom's Story.
Thank you.
And this one is by Lee Reeves.
All right. I'm intrigued with the subject matter here. And I love the different textures of the grass, the water, and then the tonal variations. We basically have like 4 tones in this image. You know, you've got highlights and midtones and shadows and deep shadows. And that makes it pretty interesting. But I'm not sure where to go. You know, as much as dynamic as the image is, and as much as movement is happening there, I don't know. My eye just kind of ends up right here in the middle of the frame, and it stays here. And I don't know if that's entirely or partly due to the specular highlight on this one water drop right here that is smack dab in the middle of the frame. But I think it's tonally and subject-wise really pretty interesting. And I, as you can see, I did a number of different crops on here, and I really had a hard time finding a crop that I liked. You know, I ended up making it square, and I'm not sure that that's even really better. So I'd like to. I would. It looks like it's you know, not a 2:3 proportion. I don't know if this is a cropped image or not. I'd love to see the whole frame and see what we could make from, from everything that was there.
This is Joanne Stam.
All right. I like this one very much. It's just fun. It's a lot of fun, and that's what jumps out at me right away. It's fun. It's playful. I can't be sure, but it kind of looks like it's not level. Like it's leaning to the left a little bit. You can't really tell from these sticks coming out of the water, but you can tell from the reflection back there. That's an easy fix, and you can, whether it's truly level or not, I think you can visually level it in a way that makes more sense, just like that, from there to there. To me, that makes more sense. But now we've got this issue of this reflection of this big tree in the background is competing for attention with what's really interesting. And what's interesting is the foreground. So I did some selective adjustments to brighten up the 3 sticks there and darken down the light tree in the background. So we go from there to there. And I think that's more powerful. But fun subject. I enjoyed that image a lot. Okay.
This is Joanne Stam.
I really appreciate the simplicity of this image, and I think it's a very strong composition, and it's very well balanced. It's very well exposed, technically very good, and I think it works nicely. It's not, it's not tremendously exciting subject matter, but I think working with what you've got there, you did a really excellent job with the composition and the, as well as the technical aspects of executing the photograph. It's lovely.
This is by Lee Reeves.
Okay. Wow. How can you not love this one? It's just the subtlety of the hues, the colors, the tones are really fabulous. The position of the bird, the counterpoint of the grass in the foreground, but especially just the subtlety of the tonality and the colors. It's just that muted, wonderful palette in this soft light. So very nice. I made a few little adjustments. Basically, I think this grass in the lower left-hand corner is a little bit too strong. It's just a little bit, and this is going to be a very subtle adjustment. You may or may not be able to appreciate it, but I just brought it down just a little bit. I did a local adjustment and raised the blacks and lowered the highlights and the whites. So again, there's the original and there's the update. And I like the composition very much. You could consider, well, let me bring my tab back here and unlock the crop. You could also consider, something like that. And I think that works too. I'm not necessarily better, but I do think just toning down the grasses a little bit here, it works as a counterpoint to the bird, but it's just a little bit too strong there. So nice, very nicely done.
Ginny Lodge.
All right. Oh, that's not as she gave it to us. There we go. I'm sorry. Great subject matter, great color, and I think it's really, I think it's very nicely executed. Except, you know, cropping these guys down at the bottom, no problem. But cropping the top of the frame so close to this dark line on the edge, that to me, that was a little bit distracting. I wish there was just a little bit more clearance at the top. You know, maybe you can bring it down like that. It's not as satisfying as I'd like it, as I think it could be, if instead we had, you know, a little bit more space at the top. I think I did crop this narrower. I'm not sure that it's much of an improvement, but I'm just trying to, again, really narrow it down to the, you know, the pure elements of it's, you know, it's like, you know, reminding me of Monet's water lilies there. So lovely image. I wish there was just a little bit more on the top.
Ginny Lodge.
Okay. This one too, I think, and this is one of the ones that I think a few tiny little adjustments can totally change this entire photograph. You know, I can see what you were going for pretty clearly, but I think that makes it so much more powerful. Yeah, so there's a little bit of vignetting, graduated filter on the top, and then a crop to just, you know, put the emphasis. These in focus plants in the foreground that are really the subject of the image, they are more obvious, they stand out more, they get more attention in this crop than they do here. This one, this diagonal line across here is really distracting, and it takes away from these grasses in the middle here. So just crop it a little tighter, put a little vignette on it, and boom, you got a winner. Wow. So,
Bill Coughlin.
yeah, Jordan Pond up in Acadia. It's gorgeous. And I think we've got a strong composition here. You know, the movement in the image is from the lower right corner into the middle of the frame, and then back to the bubbles on the other side of the pond there. The bubbles would be these hills in Acadia, or as they're known. The color feels a little bit intense, a little bit forced, considering it's such soft light. You know, there's no direct light, but the color is like, you know, super intense. But more than that, this reminds me of when we saw the glacier fed image with the rocks and tree on the right hand side, that, you know, they weren't really adding anything to the image. I think you could say the same thing about the left bit of this one. So look what happens. I'm going to reduce the red saturation a little bit, and also crop a little bit off the left hand side. And wow, that's just gorgeous and powerful. There's so many different objects to look at here, and the sticks in the water, the tree in the water, the rocks, the reflection, and the color. There's a lot of things going on here that really work for this image. So well done. And this one is sunrise. Okay, so I really, you know, I struggled to have a lot to say about this image, and I'm not sure why. You know, I think it's pretty well done, pretty nicely composed. it's obviously it's dramatic, it's bold, there's, intense light and colors. Um, there's some pretty heavy clipping in the highlights there, but you're shooting right into the sun. Um, maybe the idea was going for the sunburst or the starburst around the sun. If I were shooting this scene, I would have done it when the sun was behind, a little bit more behind these super dense clouds. I just I don't like to see the the blown highlights so much. I'd rather see just the the clouds and the color and the sunrise. But it's gorgeous.
That was from Bill Coughlin.
And this was Bill's too, right?
The one before, yes.
Yeah. I think this one's definitely the winner of the two for sure. All right. Okay. Wave, Wild Water. All right. Yeah, I think this is nice. What's working here is it is condensed down to the essentials. There's nothing extraneous here. It's good use of a fast shutter speed to catch that water frozen in space. I think this little bit of wild water behind the main wave adds a little bit of interest in the background here in what could have otherwise been empty space. Yeah, it's just bold and dramatic, and I like the way you filled the frame with the wave there.
Tom's Story was that last one.
Okay. Because this was a JPEG file, I couldn't, I didn't have access, obviously, to what you started with, but there's something going on in the processing of the image, and I'm making an assumption it's processing. It's very highly stylized, and it looks like either a lot of clarity, or if you're doing Silver FX, like a tremendous amount of structure here that's creating some artificial looking artifacts in the rock. And I'd love to see the original image and make perhaps a more subtle edit. I think the composition is great. I love the way that you've got these three different layers of waterfall with little punctuation marks of rock, and I think a black and white is a good choice for it. On the other hand, there's some processing artifacts that make it look a little bit kind of fake, I think.
That was Vince Pellegrini.
Oh. Uh-oh. Okay.
You're fired.
Yeah, clearly. You're supposed. Okay. So this one here, another waterfall image, kind of pretty flat light, which is often the case in these kind of environments. Good depth that, we go back through the image because of the zigzag and the diagonal lines in the image. I think that's what makes it strong. I think there's a little bit on the left and right that could be cropped out and condense it down to the essentials. So I'm not sure if we want to lose all of this mossy area on the left side. But let's try it. Let's take it down and then bring it on the right side. I think as you approach a square, you kind of have to go square if you're almost there. So how's that? Now you really, that emphasizes this movement from the lower right-hand corner into the image, and then this line takes us back and then we go to this waterfall. So I think you get a more powerful sense of movement and depth. And right now it puts one of the intersection of the thirds right here on this point, which I think helps it and gives it focus as well. So from there to there. Okay.
That was also Vince Pellegrini.
All right. Cool.
Ivan Bub. Oh, I think, hold on. Hold on 1 second, Lance, please. Yes, Ivan Bub.
All right. Simple subject matter, beautifully composed and conceived. That's great. There's, I wouldn't change much at all about this image. And I think you've got a nice anchor point right here, and it leads us down. Our eye goes here. We look, this water line just pointing this way leads us in here. We go up and around, and your eye travels through the whole photograph. And that is, I think that's really important. If your eye just goes to one spot and sticks there, or goes to one spot and moves out of the frame, you're losing the viewer's attention rather quickly. And this one holds the viewer's attention. Every bit of the image has something interesting to look at. Now, the only adjustment that I would make on here, it's a little bit bright on the left side of the frame. So I put a graduated filter on there and just made a subtle adjustment here. Very subtle, but it just helps to, focus on the, bring us in there. So there we go. All right.
Ivan Bub.
So this is a beautiful scene. There's a lot to work with here. And what's the darkest parts of the image, because it's a very, very soft, low contrast image with not much, because of the light, because of the fog. And it's, there's mood, there's atmosphere. So that's what we've got going for us. In any time you've got a low key image like this, there's, the darkest parts of the image hold your attention. Now, the way this image is composed, we've got this rock protruding through the surface right here in the lower right, and then we've got the two ducks or what birds, whatever they are, over here on the left. And that does allow us to go from here. My eye goes here first, and then it goes over here to the birds, and then it follows the horizon line. I don't know if this is the best we can do with the image or not. You can see I made a bunch of adjustments on here, and I went back and forth between all of them, looking at, just how can I make this, how can I improve on this? And I don't know if I did or not, but so the first thing was just try to make it a little bit more dramatic, crop some of the sky, darken some of the foreground. Not sure it's better. I kind of think I like the original better. And then thought, well, let's minimize, it's a minimalist image. Let's make it even more minimal. And there's the left side of the frame. And there's the right side of the frame. So you get 3 photographs in one out of this one. So I'm not sure, what the, what the winner is. But I'll just say one more thing here. There's a whole lot of nothing between this focal point and this focal point. And maybe that's the point, the expanse, the quiet, the solitude of being out on the lake early in the morning or late in the evening with this fog. All righty.
This is Richard Shea.
Pretty spectacular scene there. and I think it's a strong composition. It feels it feels overly bright somehow. You know, I'm not sure quite why, but it felt a little bright, and it's a big wide open scene, and I think the clouds creating this triangle here that lead us back into the far point in the distance, pulling us into the background, but we've got this anchor point here. So I think this is a pretty great image. I did crop it a little bit tighter and darken it down, put some vignetting on there. So there was my edit. Oops. And there's how it came to me. So just a different interpretation. You know, whether you like it better or not doesn't really matter. But I feel like taking a little bit off that right-hand side there just allows the tension between the foreground and the background to be exaggerated a little bit. Okay.
Richard Shea.
All right. Boulder Beach in Acadia. Know that spot anywhere. Now, beautiful light, great location. But I think the emphasis is on the wrong syllable. And what I mean by that is these rocks right here get all the attention. Rather, you know, it's all about the little cove, the light, the last or first light on the rocks there. But these guys being so big and prominent in the foreground command too much attention. And I think just a slightly higher camera position would have been an improvement there. There's also, you know, kind of some empty space on the left side that isn't really helping the image. So there's my edit. These guys are still really prominent here in the foreground, but it feels more balanced than this one, which is really heavy on the right side and very open and light on the left side. But I think still a camera position that was, you know, another foot or so higher might have helped this one and minimize these rocks in the foreground where the interest is really in the background there. And that is the last one in this category.
Okay. So we'll start with honorable mention. This is Joanne Stam. We have that up there, okay? And Richard Shea. Again, for those joining late, most of these groupings, there are 2 honorable mentions special for tonight. Third
Sorry,
place.
guys, I just couldn't decide.
Yeah, no problem. No problem at all.
I think having multiple judges probably makes having fewer ties, right?
It's been wonderful, Lance. Bill Coughlin with Jordan Pond number 3. Number 2, Ivan Bubb, Pools of Water. And number 1 in Class A Nature, Lee Reeves, our first international member.
Congratulations, everybody. All right, so.
And we should be back to use screen sharing.
Yep. There we go. All right. So One thing I want to say about judging this particular group of images, this category, man, talk about apples and oranges. It's really difficult to to assess all of these different images, this different subject matter, and pick one over the other. That's true on on a lot of them. But okay, so let's go in here.
Joanne Stam.
This image wins the award for most adjustments on it. It's crazy subject matter and crazy light. But I think there's some issues with the image. I don't know if this is a sky from another scene or not. It looks like it is. And that, to me, that's a problem. I don't have a problem with somebody pasting in another sky. But if it looks obvious, then, that's kind of a turnoff. And you may not have done that. It may be just the way you process the image. But that was the first thing I noticed. The light in the sky doesn't seem to match the light of the structures. And if you're going to paste in another sky or process it with a heavy hand, it's got to look realistic and believable. And to me, this doesn't. These spots of bare earth in the foreground are a little bit distracting, as is this T shape in the road in the background. So if you're going to process with a heavy hand, let's take it all the way. And here's what I did with it. So still heavy-handed. You see I got rid of those spots in the foreground, muted this line here, this vertical line in here, made the sky a little bit more dramatic. It still wasn't quite working for me. Boom. You can still see the artifacting around the crenellations in the towers against the sky, this kind of edge effect, this little pixelated edge effect. But it feels a little bit more believable in black and white to me. And I'll just leave it at that. All right. This one here, I had some problems with this one too. It's a pretty interesting scene. It's an interesting place. I'm just not sure what to make of it. We've got basically three elements. You've got the flowers in the foreground, the wall and the doorway, and then the trees in the background. But they all sort of have equal weight. I think the framing, the composition is nicely balanced, and I would say that it's well composed, but there's no real emphasis on any one part of the image. I'm not really sure what I'm supposed to make of it. So
That was by Larry Stam.
all right. This one, I think, is a cloned in sky also, and it's pretty easy to see right here. And there's little evidence of pasting in a sky all along the outline of the building. And again, I don't have a problem with doing it, but if you're going to do it, it can't be obvious. The composition is a little bit tight on the bridge, and I have photographed covered bridges, and I know they are this amazing structures, but they're almost always really, really difficult to photograph well. And this, to me, this image is like, here's this thing, and here it is, and I don't know where to go with it from there. So.
That is by Joanne Stam.
Okay. this is a beautiful scene. I like this very much. I love the feeling that I get from this is wonderful. My biggest beef with it is the proximity of the light of the reflection to the edge of the frame there. And it's yes, I'm being very nitpicky with that, but I wish there was a little bit more at the bottom. And considering your crop, there may well be. If you can add just a little tiny bit more on the bottom, that would make me happy. So what I did was I cropped into it, and I also cropped on the right-hand side. I didn't crop so much as to get into this tree reflection, but rather than just have it this skirting the edge of the frame, it's fully cropped out. My preferred crop would be, rather than making it tighter like it is here, if we had just a little bit more space on the bottom.
Bill Coughlin was that last image.
All right. Now this is powerful, right? It's bold, it's dramatic, it's stylized. Again, there's kind of a heavy-handedness to the processing. Whether it's a lot of something in the presence panel, clarity in particular, perhaps. Desaturation on the sky. So it's very, it's really bold. But you know what? I don't process my images this way, but I think it works really well for this particular subject matter. So it's a good pairing of processing style with subject matter. It's strong, it's bold, it's simple. Lady Liberty, there you go.
Bill Coughlin's image.
All right. So this one I can see, it's eye candy, right? I see what caught your eye for sure. But I don't think there's enough to hold it. You're seduced by the color and the shapes and the patterns, but compositionally, there's not much else there. I don't think, cropping it in one way or another is going to change that. There's no real focal point. It's just a field of colors and shapes.
Tom Story.
All right. So this is a pretty interesting and very surreal feeling scene. And I feel like the right side and to a certain extent the left side are not really adding too much to what's going on here. And if you look at my develop history over here, it's almost all cropping variations. I find this, this white painted board over here to be a little bit distracting. But again, the right edges there, the right side of the frame, the left side of the frame, they're not adding anything. You've got the depth without it. You've got this kind of Magritte feeling surrealism. So I cropped it, it's almost square and completely square versus this wider view. I think the image is about what's happening through the doorway, and what's on the left and the right, aren't really adding to that story very much. You don't need to see what's going on there.
That one, the last one was Vince Pellegrini.
All right. This is cool. This is really neat. And I like the way that there's, you're dividing the image into quarters, into different segments. and there's something in each one of those quarters. You know, the wood here, the truck, the building, the green thing out here. You've got the layers. What I think is taken away from the image is the window frame on the right hand side. There's more of it than you need. So I did a little bit of perspective correction and a little bit of a crop, just made it a little bit tighter. And, it's not, I don't think it's taking away anything from the story. If anything, it makes the story come forward a little bit more.
Same guy, Vince Pellegrini.
All right. Okay. This is a beautifully simple image. It's, there's nothing exciting happening. The light is not dramatic, but it's just wonderfully composed, and great lines, great graphics, great color, and very nicely balanced. So I wouldn't do a thing to this one.
Tom Story.
All right. So conceptual image. I think we know who's going to win this battle, right? So it's a cool idea, and I think we can make it better by making it tighter. Wait a minute. Yeah. So from there, I'm sorry, we weren't even looking at the original one. I'm sorry. This is the original. And then my crop is coming in tighter. So I apologize to you. We should have been looking at this one first. But I think you can make the story a little bit stronger by just condensing it down to that.
Ginny Lodge on the last one.
Okay. And this is a cool choice to choose the moment before you throw the flower in the compost pile to photograph it. I like that. That's cool. I love seeing the pollen has fallen off of the stamens and is resting there. Real high key image. A little bit off center, and I think that it works. The extra white space on the left hand side works because of this leaf on the lower right. That gives it a balance. This would be a great image to use for an ad. There's perfect space for a marketing person to put some text up here. And if I don't know why, I just yeah. So nicely done.
Ginny Lodge.
This is so cool. It's just it's fascinating. It's fun to look at, and it's just amazing to think about the little world of things that we never experience, without doing this kind of stop motion, high speed flash photography. So really cool. And a lot of fun. I've never done this myself, and I imagine you drop a lot of whatever you're dropping into the water to get one that is this perfect. So nicely done. Only thing I would say would be you could darken down this bright area in the water at the very bottom of the frame just to contain it a little bit. But very minor nitpicky thing there. That's cool.
Larry Stamm.
Okay, so this was fun too. It's living in two planes, right? You've got the leaves on the surface of the water and the reflection, and you get this really cool 3D effect. And I think it works. I think it works well because the leaves are in the dark part of the frame. You know, if the leaves were over here in the chaotic reflection, it wouldn't be nearly as strong an image. So well done there.
Lee Reeves.
Okay. Night Skyline. Comments on this one. You know, you're looking at an extremely dynamic scene here, really, and by dynamic I mean high contrast. My comments on here would be, it would be easier to control. You did a pretty good job with the exposure considering the time of night that you're working here. It's a lot easier to pull this off as a twilight exposure than as a full-on night shot, or on a full moon night when there's a lot more light in the sky and you get some color in the sky. The other thing that I would look at here would be the white balance, and I'm not going to be able to do much with the color because it's a JPEG, but you know, there's all kinds of options for white balance, you know, from between where we started to more neutral to really kind of cool. You know, my own inclination would be, you know, to go somewhere in this area. It just feels a little bit more comfortable. You still have the color, but you don't have that kind of monochromatic yellow that's kind of overwhelming everything.
Lee Reeves.
And this image is in particular is one of the ones that made me reflected my original comment about, you know, judging all of these different photographs in different subject matter, and just, I mean, how can you not feel this? How, you know, just the world that we live in, that you know, this kind of poverty and desperation exists, and that we you know, immunize ourselves against it to the point where, you know, we can walk past it and not feel more than a tinge of pity. You know, it's really powerful.
Ivan Bub.
Yeah, it's very, very, very powerful image. And Ivan, if you're not familiar with Kudelka's work, you should check him out too. All right. You know, it's kind of funny to go from this to this, you know, in terms of subject matter, from, you know, the horrors of what a difficult place it could be that we live in, you know, to this completely frivolous and, you know, insignificant street scene. It could be, you know, it could be just down the road. The guy in the background walking by with a cup of coffee, good timing getting him against that white column. I think that makes for an interesting addition to the image, and it, you know, it gives this a depth to it that we wouldn't have otherwise. But
Ivan Bub.
yeah. So I'm kind of glad that it was the same person who did both images. Let's just show this juxtaposition of these two right next to each other is really pretty striking.
I did add your author into the chat room.
Oh, okay, thank you. Cool. Nice black and white conversion there. Good composition, good use of the foreground. There's a little bit of artifacting around the top of the lighthouse that I think you can fix it and make it go away. But yeah, I'm just seeing like a little bit of dark. Whether I don't know if it was something in the post-processing right around the top of the lighthouse that needs fixing. But cool shot, good composition, nicely balanced and I like the high contrast black and white tonality.
Richard Shea.
All right. Well, it's all about the lighting. Really gorgeous lighting on here, and yeah, it's simple, straightforward, powerful, elegant. It's elegant, you know. That's what I say about that. And I love the key light, whether it's back or side lighting there. I guess more of a backlight, just bringing up that dark edge, really separating what would otherwise kind of blend into the dark background. So very nicely done there.
Richard Shea.
And that's the last one.
And our last group of award winners, let's see here. So we'll start with honorable mention, and this particular group, there's one honorable mention, not two. That's the honorable mention. Ivan Bubb, Division of Wealth. Third place, Larry Stam, Water Drop Magic. Second place, Window Garden, Tom Story. And the first place, Magnolia Bud by Richard Shea.
All right. Congratulations to everybody.
And if we want to go to gallery view and unmute, you're welcome to do that. And you can check out the chat room at the bottom for the reference that Lance gave us. Lance, that was awesome. The comments I have are just incredible. I will share them with you. These were comments through the whole group. I will share them with you. It was felt to be incredible input of huge quality. I can say you put in a gigantic amount of effort. I actually didn't expect you to spend as much time as you did going through these images. It was extremely educational for me. And as one of the participants said to me, why do we see our mistakes when they get projected in the competition? And I know in my instance, as soon as you put it up there and you hit the right wall, that window shot is up. He's so right. I mean, you were so insightful for, at least I know for my images, and the comments, everyone felt the same.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, you know, I feel doing something like this, it doesn't really do anybody any good to just say, nice picture, or very good or whatever, you're putting your work out there, and it's called a critique. So I want to evaluate it and give you whatever my insight onto what's working and what's not working and what you can do to make it better. So I appreciate everybody's openness to criticism. So thank you. It was fun. There was a lot of good images there.
Did you want to tell us about your stuff coming up, Lance?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'm gonna throw up a.
And if anyone wants to make comments to Lance or to the group, feel free.
Give me a second. Let me just go full screen on this one. I'm just gonna throw up. an image real quick. There we go. You know, Vince mentioned that I'm one of the partners in National Parks at Night. When we started, just tell you just a little bit about NPAN, as we call it for short. We are 5 guys who are passionate about night photography, and we came together about 6 years ago to create a program teaching night photography workshops, specifically, but not exclusively, in national parks. We all have different backgrounds and different experience, but all have been photographers for a very long time and have all been interested in photographing at night. So of course, this year has put a kink in our program, as you might expect. You know, I think it was Matt and Gabe who were going to be coming in and presenting or taking guys out on a photo walk. Well, hopefully we can get that rescheduled for another time. But I just got the news today that we got the go-ahead from the state of Maine to run our 2 July workshops on the coast of Maine. So I'm really excited about that. It'll be the first thing that we've done since Lofoten in the very beginning of March, just when this was all starting. So we do night photography workshops. We do photography tours. And the tours are international destinations that include both day and nighttime photography. Workshops are classroom intensive. We get image critiques like we just had during the daytime, lectures with technical presentations, and then go out and shoot into the field at night. And the tours are just shooting all the time, day and night, to interesting and beautiful locations around the world. We have a weekly blog post with educational articles on the subject of all things nocturnal and, of course, especially night photography. It's free. We have you can subscribe to that and you'll get it in your mailbox every weekend, once a week. We also do one-on-one tutoring in night photography, whether it's meeting in person to do a private night photo workshop, or even, you know, online Zoom work, reviewing your portfolio, doing Lightroom work. And like Vince mentioned, we are now doing online live Lightroom classes. And we'll also have a Photoshop class coming up in probably a couple of months. There is one section of this Lightroom class, the same one that Vince did last month. It's 4 2-hour classes on Friday and Saturday, 2 consecutive weeks, and then you schedule an hour of one-on-one time with one of the instructors to go over anything that you want specific help on in Lightroom. And that is starting not this weekend coming up, but the week after that, so the next two weekends. Aside from that, we do occasional ebooks that are downloadable from our website. We just did one a couple of days ago on tripods, a guide to tripods. 70 pages of information and a buying guide on tripods. Anyway, you can follow us on social, National Parks at Night. That's our website as well, nationalparksatnight.com. So anyway, oh, and the bottom of the frame there, that's my book, the second edition of my book, Night Photography and Light Painting, and Chris Nicholson's Photographing National Parks as well. So anyway, thanks for your attention tonight.